לקצר את כל המיץ.
מי פותח את הישיבה ה-71 של הישיבה?
Open the 71st session of the trial.
Our next witness is Mrs. Vera Alexander.
Yes, Anna.
Nie, to chyba nawet. President of Court, who is this person in the audience who is so happy about something here that we can hear it all the way? President of Court, to the witness, do you speak Hebrew, madam? Can you take the oath in Hebrew? Please place your right hand on the Bible and repeat after me. I swear by God Almighty that my testimony in this trial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. President of Court, please quiet in the hall, and please expedite matters at the door there. What is your full name, madam?
Vera Alexander.
What language do you wish to testify in? Mr. Hausner, my experience shows that the witness can testify in Hebrew. President of Court, all right. You may be seated, madam. Attorney General, Mrs. Alexander, you live in Nest Ziona?
Yes.
You are an art critic?
Yes.
You were born in Slovakia?
Yes.
In 1942, there were published in the Slovakian press pictures and notices, articles about the fate of the deportees, of the Jewish deportees from Slovakia and Poland. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And the picture was a very pink one. It said that these people were feeling well and were safe.
Yes.
And there were also pictures of gay faces and smiling girls and so on.
Yes.
One day, you and others gathered in a cellar and you were detained, right?
Yes.
When was that?
This was at the beginning of April 1942.
Where were you taken, Mrs. Alexander?
From the cellar, we were taken to Žilina. This was a concentration camp in Slovakia.
Under whose guard were you placed?
The Linkova Garda.
President of Court, who?
The Linkova Garda.
Attorney General, were there any Germans also?
No.
And from there, where were you taken?
From Žilina, we were taken on the 8th of April in
President of Court, what
the
year?
year of 42 in trucks to Auschwitz on the railway coaches.
What was your feeling when you reached Auschwitz? Your own feeling and that of your girlfriends who came with you?
The minute we arrived at Auschwitz, we saw all the articles and the pictures and realized it was true. We heard screams from SS men, and when we entered the camp, before we were ordered to undress, we saw in the blocks in Auschwitz people, we could not say if they were men or women. The heads were shaven. We thought they were not normal. Only their heads were showing. They were pointing with their fingers to their mouths, scratching after we were undressed and given the Russian clothes full of lice. We understood what they tried to explain. Everything was taken away from us.
And into what block were you placed?
At first, I was taken to block 7.
Was that a women's block?
Yes, a women's block number 7.
How many women were in that block?
I do not know how many we were to the block, but there were 2 women on each narrow bed.
And what other blocks were you in later?
Later, I was in block number 9. My mother was in block 10. This was done according to age groups.
President of Court, according to what?
Age groups.
Mr. Hausner, block 7 and block 9, you say?
Yes, I was in block 7 and later in block 9.
Mr. Hausner, did you go out to work at first?
Yes, I went out to work to the Landwirtschaftskommando.
What was it like for women who worked at Auschwitz?
We had to undig beetroot from the soil after the beets were rotting in the earth for a number of years. They were still left by the poles. They were reeking. Sometimes we came upon a good plot, and if anyone dared touch these beets and take them to their mouth, this meant death.
The people would be killed, whoever touched the beets, is that it?
Exactly. Sometimes we did a kind of work which we did not understand if the work was really necessary, why we were told to do this. There was a field on a hill, and we had to straighten out that hill. We had to take a whole mount of earth from one place to the other. We did not understand if this was really necessary and why we were made to do it.
What time did a work-a-day begin?
Work would begin at 7.
When did the day begin?
But the day began when the stars were still in the skies.
President of Court, at what hour?
We had no watches. I do not know the time.
And when did it end? Mr. Hausner's question.
It was dark when the day's work ended.
Then you were a block senior? In what block?
Yes, I was a block Älteste in block 3 in Camp A. This was a quarantine block. I do not know why this was called a quarantine block, because those who were in the block used to come in touch with all the prisoners in the camp. But this is how it was called.
Tell me, Mrs. Alexander, please, how could one be a block senior in Auschwitz and keep the image of a human being?
It was not easy to guard one's image of God and the image of a human being at Auschwitz, yet be a block Älteste. One needed a lot of tact. On the one hand, to obey orders. On the other hand, to hurt prisoners as little as possible and to try and help the prisoners.
Well, how did you do it?
Sometimes there were orders that the women in the quarantine, they did not work. They were always in the block, not permitted to sit on the bed, not to go to their beds. The beds had to be in order. We had girls on the watch at the entrance to the block and permitted these women to sit on their bunks, on their beds. And if the guards came along, were coming up to the block, or an SS man, we used to go into the block and get those women off their beds in a hurry.
We heard that you had saved women from death. Please, could you tell us how you did that?
There were cases after selections were carried out in camp where women were taken to their death. And I knew to which blocks the men who conducted this selection were going in. I tried. I did not always succeed to take them out of the lines. Sometimes I succeeded. I put some of the women into commando units, those who went out to work. This was not an act of heroism. This was my duty and my task. I cannot remember how and how many times I did it.
You still meet former inmates from your block to this very day, don't you?
Yes.
Were you ever in blocks where women were working?
No. When I was block Eltester, there were days when women would be taken out of the blocks to fetch bricks from somewhere, but this was only a matter of a couple of hours.
Do you remember once when you were taken ill and placed on sick parade in that little infirmary which they had? What happened then?
I went into this Revier, the infirmary. I do not know what ailed me, what was my sickness. I stayed there for a couple of days. And then a nurse took me out. I was not well yet. I wanted to go back to hospital, to this Revier. In the evening, I went in through the cellar and saw around the walls, near the walls, women were sitting, crouching. I recognized some of the women from my own hometown. I went up to them. I wanted to speak to them. And the moment I came near, I realized they were all dead.
And then you fled from the place.
Then I understood why they took me out of the Revier.
Who tended the people in the infirmary at Auschwitz?
Treated. This was not medical treatment. We did not receive any medicine. There were Jewish women, and from time to time...
President of Court, what was the position of these Jewish girls? Were they nurses or what?
They were cleaning the hospital.
Yes, please go ahead. You said that physicians would enter?
From time to time, doctors, German doctors, would enter this Revier.
Attorney General, Mrs. Alexander, the orders which you got as a block senior, from whom did you get these orders?
Either from the SS men directly, or through a messenger, a Läuferin from the gate, who used to come and tell us what were the orders for the day.
The Läuferin, the messenger girl, was Jewish?
Yes.
And you were required, as others were, to be stern towards the other inmates.
Of course.
What did you do in order to avoid complying with such orders? How did you manage to do that?
One day, in the Lager C, I received from Irma Grese a whip. I never used that whip.
How did it come about that you were appointed a block senior?
One day, the Reportschreiberin Kato Singer called me.
She's in Slovakia today?
Yes. She told me that I am appointed block Älteste in block number 3. I told her I could not do it. I did not have it in me. She asked, she begged that I take this upon myself.
Why did she do that?
She said that she believed that one has to undertake such tasks and do them as humanly as possible.
How old were you then?
I was 20 or 21 years of age.
President of Court, what was the Schreiberin, the Rapportschreiberin? What kind of a position was that?
Rapportschreiberin was... She would receive from the Schreibstube a report how many prisoners were in camp. After the roll call, after the Blockführerin would come to receive the number of inmates in each block, and the report Schreiberin, it was her duty. There was a copybook to each block where the number of prisoners would be recorded. She had to take this report and hand it over to the Lagerführerin.
Attorney General, the Lager commandant was an SS woman, wasn't she?
Yes.
President of Court, the Rapportführerin was a liaison woman between the commander of the camp and the block seniors, is that correct, more or less?
Camp, this was taken to the woman who kept all these reports, the
Attorney General, the Rapportführerin was also a German woman, an SS woman, yes?
Yes.
So Katya pleaded with you to take the job, and you agreed?
Yes, I agreed.
Were there ways of helping women when you had such a position?
Yes, there were ways of helping them. First, one could give them their food rations as they were handed to us without stealing from
you
them.
mean?
And then there was a way to steal for them from the stores a number of blankets, a cake of soap, a little more food from the kitchen. A little more clothing from the Bekleidungskammer. There were possibilities and ways.
We have heard of 2 Slovakian boys who had escaped from Auschwitz, and they wrote a report in Slovakia later. Did you know one of these boys?
I knew both.
I see you knew both. Do you know their names?
One of them is now Dr. Werber. His name was Walter Rosenberg at the time, and the other one was Metzger.
President of court, now his name is a little more Slovakian. He changed his name?
Yes, he changed his name. He joined a partisan group and he kept the name.
President of court, what was the second name?
Dr. Rudolf Werber.
Judge Halevi is still here. Is he still alive, and where?
He's alive in London, and he visited Israel. He worked for the Weizmann Institute.
Attorney General, do you remember Dr. Mengele, the notorious Dr. Mengele?
To my regret, I remember him well.
We have heard about him, but we have not heard one thing about him. Do you remember the experiments which he conducted with people, inmates?
I saw only one experiment.
What did you see?
There were two children, twins, gypsy children. They took them from the block I was in. This was the camp of the gypsies. And a few days later they were brought back, stitched up together. Their hands, the veins of their hands were stitched together, of the two children, and in their back.
President of court, I did not understand this. Attorney General, he stitched them together. President of court, he stitched the veins together. He made them to be Siamese twins.
He sewed together the hands of the children. It was full.
Attorney General, and they did not live much longer. Is that it?
I succeeded in getting out before the end came. I asked the Lagerführer to take me back to the women's part of the camp.
Do you remember the period of the Hungarian women in 1944?
I remember.
Could you tell us something about that period?
After I left the gypsy camp and the Zigeuner block, I came back to Camp A. After a time, I returned to be Blockälteste as before. And this in the blocks of the Hungarian women in the gypsy camp. There were 6 blocks. When I was given this task again, on the following day, the Lagerälteste was a Jewish woman. She called us and said that she was told these women do not know anything of what was going on at Auschwitz, and they were not to know. If we can keep quiet and not tell them, not make them realize what was going on, we should keep quiet. I did not keep quiet.
What did you tell them?
I asked them never to complain about their health, never to say that they did not feel well, never to ask for their parents, otherwise they would be picked out in the following selection.
Why? What would have been their fate if they had asked for that?
I told them that if they did ask, they will pay with their lives.
If they would say that they wanted to see their dear ones?
Yes. Later, when a doctor arrived in camp, Dr. Klein, he was an SS from Romania and spoke Hungarian. One of the women jumped up from her bed and said that his promises that they would be taken to a camp where they would not work and that life would be easier. This seems to be not true. And she pointed at me and said, this woman told us a different story. He took me out of the block. I cannot say why he did not kill me right away.
But you were beaten.
Yes, of course. This
That-
was really not important.
Did you see children being led to their death?
In my block, I cannot say how an Hungarian woman came with a little girl. I kept the little girl in the block for a couple of weeks. I don't know how Irma Grese learned about this little girl. SS men, not of our camp, arrived one morning and took the child away with them. Later, I learned from people of the Sonderkommando that the child was thrown into the fire.
Keeping a child alongside a mother, that risked one's life. That was forbidden, wasn't it?
Of course. The mother on that night went to the electrified barbed wire fence.
I should like you, Mrs. Alexander, to identify a number of pictures which I have here. Pictures which were drawn after the liberation of Auschwitz. And I would like you to tell whether you can recall the scenes, whether this means anything to you. May I, Your Honors, approach the witness and show her the pictures, please? President of Court, yes. President of Court, if you wish us to see it simultaneously, sir, perhaps you and the witness could come to the bench. What does this picture mean to you, Mrs. Alexander? Is this on the way to Auschwitz? The remarks of the witness are inaudible because of the microphone is not close enough. President of Court, could you please get closer to the microphone, both of you? Attorney General, what does this picture show?
This is the entrance to Auschwitz. And when the heads were shaved and when we ceased being women.
This is what it looked like?
Yes. SS men.
President of Court, who is the barber woman?
When we entered Auschwitz, they were Jewish women. There were only a few German women in camp. They were Vorarbeiterin and Kapo.
President of Court, we heard that sometimes men perform this work. Do you know these cases?
Yes, this was later when we came to Birkenau camp.
And it took this form?
Yes.
Attorney General, what does this picture mean to you?
The crematorium.
Is this what it looked like?
The witness nods.
President
in
of Court,
assent.
it was called Koya.
Yes.